In this one, this study, they were looking back 2,500 years, and so you can see periods of time that are very clearly defined, including the period of the Black Death or the pest, the medieval period, the migration period following the Roman Empire. And so we also are extremely interested in this time period. Now this study, as I said, was done with tree rings, and as a matter of fact, the blue dots here represent where most of those records were from. And so while they're very interested in Roman time and the Roman Empire, you can follow the black line there for the Roman frontier, and you can see that most of their study was actually on the edge or outside of this area. And there's no similar type work that we have for Italy. And so our concern is, as we get closer to the center of the Roman Empire and those various changes that would have happened, what do we see going on? So our work is particularly important because it begins to concentrate on what's happening down in the Mediterranean during this time period, and not just up in Northern Europe. So the key question that we're looking at is, can we combine physical records of environmental change with written documents in a local context to better understand the human response to past climate change? So the work that I'm going to be presenting today, and Paula will be presenting today, is really mostly the physical records of reconstruction, because we use physical proxies from lake cores to try and reconstruct the environment in the past. But we are also working with Gabriele Cifani from Tor Vergata. He is a historian archaeologist, and he is helping provide some of the historical and archaeological context for the human activities that would have happened at the same time that we're discovering these physical changes. Our sites are in the Rieti Basin. We're working on 3 lakes, Lago Lungo, Riva Sottile, and Ventina. This area is particularly important because it's one large basin that in the past was one big lake that was controlled by the falls at Marmara. And many of you have probably been to those falls. Here you can see kind of the basin as it's laid out. Today, when you're looking down, it's a large kind of agricultural basin that then flows through some forested environments before the river Velino drops down to Terni. Okay? And so the river outflows over the falls at Marmara, and those falls are controlled by a travertine lip, which the history suggests that about 270, 290 BC, the Romans cut a channel to drain the basin. And so if you go up today, you can see the travertine walls, you can see the cut, and so the level of the outflow for the Velino is lowered in comparison to what it would have been under natural conditions. That would have then lowered the water table and drained the basin, allowing for agriculture. Okay? We have good written records, not only from Roman time on various things like floods, but from some of the monasteries in that area going back as far as the 8th century. We have the potential opportunity to find old manuscripts with written descriptions of how people were using this landscape. And so we're trying to go back with archives to look at some of the very early writings of this area to compare then against the physical record. There are maps, and a number of maps beginning in the 1500s that show with some level of detail the physiography of the landscape, the flow of the river in relation to the lakes. And so we're trying to use some of these old maps as well to look at how the lake has changed over time. Here's one from 1649. We can see Pieri di Luco. We can see the falls out at Marmara. We can see Rieti here. And we see a fairly large lake here where today there are smaller separated lakes. So we're trying to pull from 2 different sources, the physical as well as the historical, to try and build this picture of change over time. Today, these lakes have agriculture completely surrounding them. They are part of a natural reserve, but as you can see, the vegetative buffer for the natural reserve is very small. In the case of Lungo, crops come right up to the edge of the lake, so that there's almost no natural vegetation right along the shores as they exist today. You can also see interesting patterns in just the land, and we're able to use some of the patterns we see today in relation to some of the maps that we're finding from the 1800s to go back in time and identify how the landscape has changed.